I'm Warren Gordon, and this is my home fire digital project. The nature of the three siblings' relationship is something that is remarked upon by the text of Home Fire, particularly the dynamics between Parvez and his twin Anika and his older sister Yzma. What I want to discuss in this review is how the dynamics of the relationship interacts at times directly and correct and directly contradict the traditional/fundamentalist views in some radical sects of Islam. The traditional view in Islam is that the male is given his status as the head of the household by Allah, and the woman of the household should defer to the nearest male in the household. Parvez says as much in the argument with Anika, but Anika, of course, brushes this off and frankly dismisses him quite easily because the two of them were never brought up this way, so this traditional idea means nothing to her, which is all it can mean given her background. Her father abandoned the family when she was very young, so she has had no strong masculine presence in her life at any point. She was raised by a mother, and later, after her mother passed away, by her older sister, Isma. So she has two strong maternal figures to nil in terms of masculine figures. It only makes sense that the traditional idea of male-led households mean nothing to her, and the same held true for Pervez for a time until he met Farouk. For Parvez's relationship with Farouk introduces him to many fundamentalist Islamic ideas that he had no knowledge of given his upbringing, and he greatly enjoys the idea of having this sort of power over his sister. He says as much in part of Home Fire. I'm paraphrasing his woman. It felt good in his mouth because Parvez has been denied this sort of masculine power in this mind due to the dominance of his two sisters and his mother. Him finding out that he supposedly has his power over them for him is a great rush. It shows the darker side of Parvez and his relationship with his sisters. He loves them, but he also has an underlying resentment for them because of this perceived dominating force that they have held over him his entire life. Speaking of his, speaking of his sisters, I want to talk about where the where the eldest, Isma, fits into this veritable maze of relationship between siblings. As the oldest of the three, Isma had a great deal of responsibility since she was a small child, and even more so after the untimely passing of her mother. In a way, she has had to become both the nurturing mother and the stern father, having to pull both double duty to perhaps unconsciously fulfill the traditional parental roles of Islam. This created a strange dynamic that caused much friction between the siblings. These dual parental roles that Isma was forced to take on were such a taxing burden, not only physically but mentally as well, and the religious angle compounds that stress to the nth degree for Isma, given that she is a practicing Muslim. Getting into Anika, the second sister, she as a Muslim woman who earnestly enjoys sex, makes her such a target in the world, but not only to the world, but also to her family, Parvez in particular. In that quiet argument they had, he, he spoke about the gender politics regarding British Muslims and how male British Muslims, in his mind, were worse off than female British Muslims. This strain of conversation speaks to a form of thought common in many male circles of minority groups, because they often do have to face more violence from state or police forces due to their minority status. But this strain of thought fails spectacularly at examining the mental aspect of oppression and the effects that being a minority as well as a woman might have on the psyche, which is what Parvez does in that scene. He doesn't recognize that Nika is also subject to things like slut shaming, which she experiences later in the novel from the British media, and perhaps even harsher due to her status as a Muslim woman. The common through line in the relationship of the three siblings is their consistent failures to see each other for all that they are in totality. Isma doesn't see the value of Parvez's sound project, and Nika doesn't see the stress Isma is under or the horrible ideas that Parvez is starting to believe, and Parvez does not see how hard it is to be a Muslim woman in a Western society. The selective blindnesses, the selective blindnesses of the siblings are the core tragedy of home fire, and truth be told, is the core tragedy of most of the tragedies in literature. You can see the influences of Antigonon throughout the work, but the dynamics of the three siblings is where it is most apparent. And at the end of the story, much like the tragedy is based on, ends in sadness for all parties involved, and perhaps most profoundly for Yzma, who was abandoned by her father, lost her mother, and due to life's fickle nature and their fundamental misunderstandings of each other, her two beloved
Attention
siblings.
patrons, time is now 5:50. Library will be closing in 10 minutes at 6 o'clock. Once again, the time is now 5:50. Library will be closing in 10 minutes at 6 o'clock. Please begin to gather your belongings and head towards the exit. Once again, the library will be closing at 6 o'clock. Please begin to gather your belongings and head towards the exit.
All in all, my review of Home Fire is that it's a great book, and because of the relationship dynamics between these three siblings, I consider it to be an amazing read and a great starter into discussion of British Muslims.